Hello everyone, this is the Unit 4 CR remediation video. For the Unit 4 CR, our prompt is, as we learned in this unit, poems can use descriptive language to show an experience or emotion. Explain how the author uses imagery to describe his memories, thoughts, and feelings in the poem Fern Hill. Use textual evidence to support your response. Okay, so what we are looking for is descriptive language. Okay. We are looking for imagery. Okay. For the poem Fern Hill. So we'll be looking at the poem Fern Hill. We're looking for descriptive language that shows an experience or emotion, or maybe even both. And then we're looking for imagery that describes the author's memories, thoughts, and feelings. We're going to explain how the author does that, uses descriptive language to show an experience or emotion, or both. We're going to explain how the author uses imagery to describe his memories, thoughts, and feelings in the poem. And then we will use textual evidence to support our response. Okay, so some notes. Imagery. What is imagery? Imagery is descriptive or figurative language, okay, descriptive language that creates a mental picture for readers. It can do so through figurative language or through sensory language. Imagery comes from the word image, which means a picture. As you read, ask yourself whether language is helping to create a picture in your mind. If that language is helping to create a picture in your mind, then that is probably descriptive language, imagery. You can find imagery in all genres: poetry, short stories, novels, narrative nonfiction, and informational texts. Authors use imagery to develop and convey theme and set mood and convey emotion. So just like in our prompt, it says poems can use descriptive language to show an experience or emotion. You can find imagery in poems, and authors use imagery to develop and convey emotion. Okay. Figurative language, here's an example. Winter descended on us like a creeping wolf in the night. Like a creeping wolf in the night is comparing winter to a wolf, saying that winter is like a creeping wolf in the night. Okay, this happens to be a simile, which is a type of figurative language, comparing two things, saying that one thing is like the other thing. Okay. Not literal, right? Winter is not creeping, like a wolf would creep in the night, but it's saying that winter descended on us kind of sneaky, slowly, and overnight. Okay, so sensory language, an example of sensory language. I listened to the sharp scream of the bird in the coal black night. Sharp scream is sensory language that appeals to our sense of hearing We can imagine what that might sound like. And coal black appeals to our sense of sight. We can imagine what that might look like. Figurative language and sensory language often go hand in hand. Sometimes they work together. The howling dogs sounded like clashing knives in a ferocious battle. So we have howling dogs, which is sensory language, right? We can imagine what that might sound like. And then like clashing knives in a ferocious battle is figurative language, again, a simile, comparing the dog's sound of howling to clashing knives in a ferocious battle, okay? So we have sensory language and figurative language working together in one sentence here. The howling dogs and clashing knives appeal to the reader's sense of hearing, while the phrase like clashing knives in a ferocious battle is a simile. Together they create imagery that conveys the sound of the dogs. Okay, so if we look at our poem here, and we listen to our poem, Fernhill by Dylan Thomas, everything that I have in red here is descriptive language. Okay, so you can see there's a lot of descriptive language here in this poem. And some of it is imagery. Okay. Some of it is specifically the types of imagery. It's figurative language. Some of it's sensory language. Okay. It's all imagery, though. Whether it's figurative language or sensory language, it's all descriptive language. It's all imagery. Okay. So if we look at some of this in red, we have under the apple boughs, lilting house, grass was green, night above the dingle starry, hail and climb, golden, wagons, apple towns, trees and leaves, trail with daisies and barley, down the rivers of the windfall light. Now, some of that is sensory language. Okay, grass was green, hail and climb, golden, the windfall light, down the rivers of the windfall light. Some of that we can imagine what that might look like, what that might sound like. Okay. Might even imagine what that might feel like, taste like. Okay. Smell like daisies and barley. Okay. Now, if we keep going, green barns, happy yard and singing as the farm was home, sun that is young, time let me play and be, golden, green and golden, I was huntsman and herdsman, the calves sang to my horn, the foxes on the hills barked clear and cold, and the Sabbath rang slowly in the pebbles of the holy streams. Now, just in that section, we have some of this is figurative language. Okay, again, it's all descriptive language, it's all imagery, but some of this is sensory language and some of this is figurative language. We have the sun is young, time let me play and be. That is personification type of figurative language. I was huntsman and herdsman. The calves sang to my horn. Okay, the foxes on the hills barked clear and cold. Right? Some of that is, a lot of that is figurative language. It's not literal. It's talking about more of the meanings behind the words, the deeper meanings. Okay. And as we continue on through the poem, you can see like this whole section is basically description, descriptive language, and imagery. Okay. Again, everything in red here is descriptive language and imagery. Okay, some of it is sensory language, some of it is figurative language. Okay. Through though I green and dying, time held me green and dying, though I sang in my chains like the sea. The last two lines of the poem is sensory language, it's personification, it's figurative language, right? This is a simile, and so all of it is imagery and descriptive language. And so you can take some of these lines or words and phrases that are in red here, and you can use them as examples excuse me, in your response paragraph as descriptive language and imagery for the poem. Okay. And some of this shows emotion, some of this shows experience, the author's experiences. Okay. All of it describes his memories, thoughts, and feelings. Okay. So for your explanation, here are some notes. A description is a picture in words that helps the reader experience something that the writer has experienced. Details often describe features of a subject, such as size, color, shape, location, or parts of objects. So sometimes when we're looking at a description, we want to look at the details that describe features of a subject, like size, color, shape, location, or parts of objects. In the example, in the case of Fern Hill poem by Dylan Thomas, he likes to describe the farm. He likes to describe the farm that he visited as a child. Okay, a lot of this is describing the farm that he played in when he was young. Okay, the farm. And so a lot of these details are describing the features of that farm. Sensory details are words and phrases that appeal to the 5 physical senses: sight, sound, taste, smell, and touch. And we can see that some of these sensory details do appeal to our 5 physical senses. We can imagine what things look like. We can imagine what things might sound like, taste like, smell like, and feel like. Imagery, again, is words and phrases that describe a person, place, or thing that helps to create pictures in the mind of the reader. If it helps you to visualize what's going on in the poem, it is imagery. Showing language is language, descriptive language that uses figures of speech, imagery, and sensory details to describe something. Showing language helps readers experience sensory details and imagery. You might think that the purpose of a descriptive poem is simply to create an accurate picture in the reader's head of whatever is being described. However, it is much more than that. Good descriptive writing creates strong overall feelings about the subject and often conveys a specific idea about it. The writer may not describe every detail about the subject, but chooses those details that vividly convey the feeling or idea he or she is seeking to communicate. So not only are we looking for details describing a subject, but we're also looking for that strong overall feeling about the subject, the emotions that are also being described here. Okay. We have examples like lovely, right? Blessed. Let's see. Spellbound. Okay. Praise. Happy. There's an emotion. Okay. Wishes. Okay, there's an idea. Cared, right? There's cared again. All right, so there are some ideas and emotions here, not just describing a place, but also describing how that place made him feel. So language and poetry. In a poem, each word is important and meaningful. Poets choose words carefully for their imagery and their sound. Here's our poem vocabulary. We have dingle is a small wooden valley. Nightjars are nocturnal birds. Ricks are sacks of hay, logs out in the open. The reference to Adam in the poem is, according to the Bible, the first man. So that's a reference to that. There's a reference to that in the poem. Personification. Thomas personifies many things and concepts in this poem. These personified items almost serve as other characters as the speaker describes his childhood experiences. For example, and as I was green and carefree, famous among the barns, about the happy yard, and singing as the farm was home, in the sun that is young once only, time let me play and be, golden in the mercy of his means. Here, the author is personifying the yard, the sun, and time as if they were alive and characters. Example of imagery, specifically colors and light. Much of Thomas's imagery relates to colors and light. We have green, night, golden, and light. Okay, colors and light. Green and golden are colors. Night is usually dark, right? Light, the opposite of dark, right? If we look at the theme of the poem, what it means, what is the message or the takeaway, we can talk more about that feeling, those emotions of the poem. In the first four stanzas, the first four sections, the speaker is joyous, right? But the tone changes. So it starts out happy. By the end, the tone is somber. Okay, at the end of the poem, it's sad. The speaker is an adult looking back at his childhood. He feels the loss of the joy and freedom he had when he was young. It says, "Oh, as I was young and easy in the mercy of his means, time held me green and dying, though I sang in my chains like the sea." The speaker uses the word green, but in a different context. Now he is green and dying, when earlier in the poem, green was a sign of life and happiness. Also, the speaker now sings, "In my chains like the sea." He has lost the freedom and innocence of youth. Instead of the freedom of childhood, he feels the change of adulthood, and maturity has caused him to recognize his mortality. The poem's theme is that the passing of youth and the loss of innocence changes the way we view life. So a lot of that descriptive language and imagery is getting us to the theme of the story. It's showing those emotions and feelings. Here's the Fernhill summary. So the poem summary. This poem is about childhood memories and about growing old. In the poem, the speaker describes the farm he visited in his youth and recreates a child's view of a beautiful and innocent world. Throughout the poem, he talks about how happy he was as a youngster and how oblivious he was that youth was passing. Fernhill is a farm where the poet spends time as a child, and a lot of the imagery and descriptive language in the poem is describing that farm. This poem is written in first person. In the beginning, the subject seems to be a male reflecting on his youth and innocence when he was carefree and time was on his side. Time is personified throughout the poem. The poem has a religious undertone and lots of natural imagery as the youth spends time playing on a farm. In the end of the poem, the subject reflects that time was indeed passing him by, but as a child, he was unaware. Okay, so natural imagery, personification is a type of figurative language, descriptive language, okay? The author of Fernhill uses poetic structure and figurative language to create mood and add meaning, okay? I'll say that again. The author of Fernhill uses poetic structure and figurative language, which is a type of descriptive language and imagery, to create mood and add meaning. The meaning meaning the theme. The poem uses language, right? Descriptive language, specifically imagery, to shape theme and to evoke an emotional response from readers. Think about what you visualized and felt as you read the poem and how your reaction reveals the deeper meaning of the piece. Okay, so think about what you visualized, okay, that mental picture that helped you understand what was being described in the poem. Okay, that's your imagery and your descriptive language. And the emotional aspect of it, how it made you feel as you read the poem. Okay, and how your reaction reveals the deeper meaning of the piece, that theme. Okay. So you can use this constructed response remediation document with the notes in the beginning, the read examples in the poem itself, and all of these notes at the end to help you create or fix your response. Okay. Make sure that you use the CR graphic organizer and the CR checklist document, helping resources to help you create your written response, and make sure that you are writing a complete and correct paragraph for your CR. Okay, also remember to refer back to the rubric, for the grading rubric, for how your work will be scored.